Now, again, the reason why this one was particularly harder is because it was had to do with some fractions. So let's take a look at this real quick. So I have r squared minus 9r equals what? 29? Is that what that is? Right, because you're isolating the constant. All right. Now, here we go. You guys are interrupting me now. Just let me go. You can figure it out later. All right. Now, again, remember to complete the square, you take half and then you square the middle term. Half and square the middle term. Now, I'm trying to convince you that half and square, leave it as a fraction. All right, so if I take half of 9, I'm just going to leave it as what? 9 over 2. Then when you square that, that becomes what? 81 over 4. So it'd be plus 81 over 4 plus 81 over 4. So everybody okay with that? And now it's a matter of factoring. So that factors into r minus 9 halves squared. All right, is equal to, now 29 times 2 is 58. 58 times 2 is 116. So that would be 116 over 4. 116 over 4 plus 81 is 197 over 4. Do you have any issues? And now what? And now we're taking the square root of both sides. So r minus 9 over 2 equals plus or minus the square root of 197 over 2. All right. Now, the reason why it's over 2 is because the square root of 4 is what? Square root of 4 is 2. So you're treating a fraction, the radical at the top and the radical on the bottom. Yes, sir? All right, that's okay. So now, final answer, you move the 9 halves over. So r equals 9 plus or minus the square root of 197 over 2, because it already has a common denominator. All right, are we okay with that? Do we need to do another one? Do you want me to do the last one there? Yeah. All right, so here we go. Number 23 was x squared plus 7x equals, is that right, 52? Yeah. All right. So now again, hopefully now are convinced that taking half is better to leave it as a fraction. So half of 7 squared would be what? 49 over 4. Is everybody okay with this? Plus 49 over 4 factors into whatever the half was. So x plus 7 halves squared. Wait a minute. 52 times 2 is 104. Double 104 is 208. 208 plus 49 is 257 over 4. Is everybody good with that? And now what? Square root. So x plus 7 over 2 equals plus or minus the square root of 257 over, so x equals negative 7 plus or minus the square root of 257 over 2. Do we have any issues with that? Yes, sir. Square root of 4 is what? Oh. There you go. Good mistake. All right. Always think about the square roots, especially in a fraction. Square root of the numerator and square root of the denominator. All right. So is everybody feeling pretty good about completing the square? Like I said on the test, this is kind of an introduction thing. So on our test, when I'm not even sure when that will be, it'll be kind of simple, actually. All right? Everybody good? What are you looking for? The tissues were disappearing. All right, here we go. Now, what I want to do is everybody flip to the quadratic formula. All right, I want to show you the very top. Look at this. That is the quadratic formula. That formula will solve any quadratic equation. All right, so that's what I'm saying. I would never tell you to complete the square if it's easier to do it by factoring or by the quadratic formula. Very rarely would I do by completing the square. And generally completing the square is for an Algebra 2 topic, all right, that you're going to need. So I've also seen it on some of the standardized tests, all right? So make sure you're aware of that. Now, I can always remember asking my teacher, how in the world did anybody ever think of something like that? And how do they even know that's true? And how am I supposed to believe you that that's true? All right? Well, you can test it, but actually I'm going to prove it for you. All right? This is one of the things now I think that separates kids who are good at math from kids who are great at math. All right? Some kids just want to know what the answer is. Some of you are actually interested in why or how that actually works. All right? So today's a day where I am going to show you how the guy who figured this out was brilliant. All right? And so again, we're going to now derive the quadratic formula. Now, some of you guys, I think it's better if you listen, right? If you want to write it down, it's okay. I'm not going to make you reproduce this. I just think it's fascinating, all right? So what I want to do now is I'm going to go to the bottom of the page, all right, and I'm going to show you how this guy was able to figure it out, all right? So here we go, all right? So a quadratic equation would be ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Now that represents any quadratic. That represents any quadratic. All right? So now what I want you to do is I want you to, we're going to solve this quadratic by completing the square. All right? So in order to solve this by completing the square, you have to isolate the constant. So the first step would be ax squared plus bx equals negative c. Everybody good with that? That's just what we did yesterday. Now the problem is the leading coefficient is not a 1, so we have to make it a 1. All right? So we have to divide everything through by what? A. We have to divide everything through by a. So now I have x squared plus bax equals negative c over a. Any complaints yet? All right, now we're going to complete the square. All right, so in order to complete the square, I have to take what? Half, and then I have to square the middle term. Well, right now, the middle term is b over a. So if I take half of that, I'll multiply by 1/2 and then square it. So that is b over 2a squared, which is the same as b squared over 4a squared. Is everybody with me on this? Everybody good on this? All right. So now I add b squared over 4a squared, adding b squared over 4a squared to both sides. That's exactly what we did yesterday with numbers. Now, after this, we factor. We factor into whatever the half was. So, what was the half? B over 2a. All right, let me answer that. Hello? Hello? Yeah. All right, thank you. Good decision. All right. Now, We factored it. Now, the hard part. This looks like the hard part here because I have to add this. All right, now we haven't had our lesson on adding rational expressions yet. All right, but we all know that we need a common denominator, correct? So the common denominator is what? Good, 4a squared. All right, the common denominator is 4a squared. Come on, you can't add the fraction unless the denominator is the same, right? So I'm looking at a and 4a squared. I can convert a to what? 4a squared by multiplying it by 4a and 4a. Is everybody with me on this? All right, so now that equals negative 4ac over 4a squared plus b squared over 4a squared. All right, so all I did was I got a common denominator. Am I good with that? Now, I have a common denominator, so I'm going to go ahead and add them. So x plus b over 2a squared is equal to b squared minus 4ac all over 4a squared. Is everybody happy with that? Now again, it's not a big deal. I just put the b squared in front of the 4ac. And because it was a common denominator, I was able to add them together. Everybody good? Now how do I undo the square? Yep, you take the square root. All right, so now here's where some people get lost. So try to stay with me. All right, when I take the square root, I'm left with x plus b over 2a is equal to the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over what? 2a. Do I agree with that? Square root of 4 is 2, square root of a squared is a. But don't forget the what? Don't forget the plus or minus. Good for you. Okay, very, very good question. Already asked me why I can't do the square root, because the numerator has what operation involved? Addition and subtraction, right? So you cannot take square roots through addition and subtraction. You can only take square roots through multiplication. You with me on this? All right, that's a common mistake. All right. Now what am I doing? I'm moving the b over 2a over. All right, so I'm going to move this over. And when I move that over, it becomes x equals negative b over 2a plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Does it have a common denominator? Yes. So I can combine and say x is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. That is the equation for solving any quadratic. All right? That's why it was kind of important to understand completing the square, because the guy who figured this out, how to solve any quadratic, did it by completing the square. All right? So again, that's a very good lesson, and I can remember going, how in the world would anybody figure that out? All right? Yes, a lot of free time on their hands. All right? So again, I want to show you the quadratic formula. Here we go. It's going to be written at the top of the page. And right now, listen, right now it looks like it's difficult to memorize. That's why I'm trying to tell you, write down the formula 4 or 5 times and you'll have it memorized. All right, you'll be using the quadratic formula until you get out of college if you're studying math. All right, it's always used, always. All right, so with that in mind, let's now figure out how to use it. All right, so for question number 2, all right, I would like for you to be able to tell me that A is equal to 2, B is equal to 8, and C is equal to 3. Is everybody good with this? Everybody with me? So now I'm going to write down the equation x equals negative b plus or minus the square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Everybody good? Now, just plugging numbers in. So, x equals. Now remember, negative b kind of means the opposite of whatever b was. All right? So we're going to say negative 8 plus or minus the square root of 64 minus 4 times 2 times 3 all over. All right? Everybody good so far? So now x equals negative 8 plus or minus. Now 4 times 2 times 3 is 24. Now I check the sign. 64 minus 24 would be what? 40 all over 4. X equals negative 8 plus or minus 2 radical 10 over 4. So you should be able to look at that and say negative 4 plus or minus radical 10 over 2. All right? That's just the arithmetic now. Anybody have any issues? All right.
What's that number in the radical?
This is a 10, sorry. That's my fault. 40 breaks down to 2 radical 10. Is that good now? All right, it's really, really simple. Really simple once you learn the formula. You just plug in numbers into formulas. All right, very easy. All right, so here we go. Let's take a look at question number 4. So the first thing I want you to do on number 4 is to tell me that A is what? 1. B is what? And C is 3. So x equals, write it out, negative b plus or minus the square root, b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Plug in, negative 8 plus or minus b squared minus 4 times 1 times 3 all over 2. X equals negative 8 plus or minus the square root of 64 minus 12, 52 over 2. Everybody good? 52 is 4 times 13, right? Negative 8 plus or minus 2 radical 13 over 2, which is the same as negative 4 plus the square root of 13. All right, please take a look at that. Oh, come on. You guys are not having trouble with 64 minus 12, are you?
No, I just can't write it fast. I was like left it up there and you were finished. And I was like,
All right. I'll try to go slower.
what happened to the plus or minus?
It just, my pen just didn't write it.
It's the minus. Yeah, sure. Blame it on the pen. Okay. I think that's user error.
No.
That's user error.
Yes, ma'am.
It's the negative 8. She just made it make sense in her head.
You did that.
All right. Speak up now if you're not sure. Good?
Yeah, you divided it.
Yes, by each one. Right, because, again, I can divide this out because they both are divisible by 2. You hear me? All right, let's have some more fun. Here we go. So let's write down what A equals.
3.
B equals.
Negative 6.
And C equals. All right, because we're fantastic, X equals negative B plus or minus the square root. B squared minus 4AC all over 2A. Give you 30 more seconds.
Oh, to do the problem. I'm like just wish I had plus or minus 2
Ooh, already done.
Oh, I got radical 12.
Radical 12. What are you, crazy?
I mean, 2 radical 3.
You're still
He always
crazy.
calls you crazy.
I realize.
That's because she is crazy.
I've gotten used to it.
Maybe that has it. What?
It's plus or minus 2 radical 3 because it's an equation. Duh. Yeah, I got 1 plus or minus 2. I got it right.
1 plus or minus 2 radical 3. Are you crazy?
I don't know. That's not it. I'm right, guys. I'm right. Listen to me.
I forgot to do something.
Why do I keep doing this?
I got it right. Just follow me.
Don't be weak.
Don't be weak.
Here we go.
6 cancels out. The plus or minus 2 radicals.
X equals 6 plus or minus.
Radical. 3, 6, 36 minus 4 times 6.
Oh my god.
Over 6.
Radical 3.
X equals 6 plus or minus.
Plus or minus.
Radical
Wait,
12.
Plus or
Two
minus.
radical 12.
12.
12. Over 6.
Oh, cancel out.
Then 6 cancels out. It equals plus or minus 2 radical. What? No.
Wait.
Oh, the 6's cancel.
Wait, what number?
He's not
What
I did this so wrong.
What?
Oh, I went to the wrong one. Wait, can you just keep
I got it right.
I did the wrong one.
Why is it negative?
Can you
What
just
the heck?
It's the opposite of B, isn't it?
Wow, Casey, that's
Wait, go back.
It says
He goes,
you X equals negative B.
It's just
basically That's a six.
the opposite of
My bad.
It's a 6, not a B.
I did.
I got it right. Wait,
Oh yeah, I believe you.
Sure.
are you proud of me?
Lots of 3. 3.
Wait.
You got it right?
Yeah. Scroll up. Look, you scroll up.
I got. Oh no, I didn't. No, I didn't.
Explain how.
I got it up. No.
Say it again.
At the bottom from where it goes from the last two X's, how do you get it goes over 6 and then over 3?
I divided by 2.
And the entire thing. Oh.
6 divided by 2 today is 3. 2 divided by 2 is 1. And 6 divided by 3 is 2. Walker, are you alright?
But then wouldn't it make 1
This
plus?
is chaos?
Yes.
This is chaos.
It's 2000 to
It's getting a little violent.
Yeah.
I'm a little worried about you,
Getting a little
Walker.
dark.
It's 2000. But then wouldn't the final answer be 1?
No! You cannot reduce through addition and subtraction.
Oh my god.
Oh my god.
Reduce
Get
through
with
addition and
it.
subtraction.
I have an answer for the next one. I'm so confused.
Alright, we're skipping the next one.
No!
Here we go. Number 8. Whoa, whoa, whoa,
I
whoa.
thought we were skipping
Slow
it.
down.
I thought we were skipping it.
Number 8. Casey, go. The beginning or
The beginning last one.
Casey, you're making sense today. I'm a little nervous.
Shh.
Hold up. Casey, go.
So, how is 2 divided by 6?
How about 6 divided by 2?
Why would it be 6 divided by 2?
Because you're dividing everything by 2.
Okay, let me go slow here for you, Casey. You ready? Watch. This is what you're looking at. This is what you're looking at. That's what you're looking at. All 3 of those terms can be divided by 2. 6 divided by 2 today is 3.
What was it? Yes.
2 divided by 2 is 1. 6 divided by 2 is 3. All right? You're welcome. Casey likes to make up his own math. All right, here we go. Number 8. All right, here we go. Now that you're comfortable with A, B, and C, you don't have to waste the time putting down A, B, and C.
Too bad.
If you have not learned or memorized the formula, practice writing down the formula. Now, I'm watching some of you cut and paste the formula. That's perfectly fine. All right, but I'm not sure if that's memorizing it. All right, it's not going to be on the test. So, step number 1, x equals negative 4 plus or minus the square root.
16 plus 24. Plus 24. Over 2.
Okay. Now, again, a lot of the mistakes come because you try to do the multiplication and you don't count the proper negatives, all right? In my opinion, I just do 4 times 1 times 6 is 24, and then I go back and count the number of negatives. There are 2 negatives, so it would be plus. So now I have x is equal to negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 40 all over 2. So x equals negative 4 plus or minus 2 radical 10 over 2. So negative 2 plus or minus radical 10.
Yes, I got it right.
If you know that, you're in outstanding shape.
Oh, I'm
Heck yeah, high five.
It's easy.
Hey.
Yeah,
Oh,
you're
you
not
know,
right
right
here,
here, still in outstanding shape.
Well, you know, McConnell, I think you're just
Alright, here we go.
Don't be jelly. Jelly's blue.
Okay, last one for us. Number 10. Quickly. Quickly. Who's got it?
No.
Man's on the eastern bowl.
Walker. Did you say you got it?
No.
Oh, I thought you said you got it. I thought you were excited.
What's a plus or minus 4? Oh, yeah. This is why we cut and paste this. No. Oh, yeah. That looks like a S1.
My eyes. No. Stop talking. Chill out.
It's alpha.
Plus 8, 16, 8, 5. 8 plus 6 is 14. Yep, we got it.
What's negative 16 times 20 negative 25?
I don't know.
What is it?
400.
What's radical 48 equal?
Obviously.
What's radical 48 equal?
Is it 4 negative or positive? No. It's positive. It's negative 4 times positive.
Shut up.
Shut up. What's the square root of 48? I don't know.
Dang it!
No.
Oh, I think you're guys.
What does radical 48 equal?
Oh, wait. I have the solution.
I have it.
I think it's 5.
What's 8 times?
Oh my god.
Oh! Breakthrough!
Go to the right. I just want to make sure I did it right.
Wait, I got this.
48 divided by 8.
Wait, what number?
What? Wait, what are you trying to get it right?
So again, 4 times 4. What's the matter?
I got it.
4 times 4 is
16. 64 minus 16 is what?
Minus 60. How did I?
Oh,
64.
I did that wrong.
I got
Plus or minus 3.
Oh, I have to do that.
I can't do negative.
No. Yes.
I got that.
I'm
off
by
I
one.
forgot.
Mr. Straw, I'm off by
So,
1.
I got it.
You might as well be off by a mile then.
Oh.
X equals 5.
Brilliant, Casey. X equals 5. Right.
X equals 0 plus 10.
I got 2 plus or minus the square root of 3 over 2. That is definitely not 5.
It's close enough.
I got it.
By 4, didn't you?
Wow.
I can't figure out.
You said what? 16 times 25. I said 400.
Yeah. So
It is.
So 20 would be the square root of that.
But you're doing 64 minus 16, not 64.
You just got everything wrong.
Is that something?
My mom
Only can't hear me.
All right.
About to
Okay, now, here we go. Listen, now these last set of problems are designed specifically for you to be able to figure out how to do the problem the quickest way. All right? So when I say, for example, 4x squared minus 25 equals 0, I would like everybody in here to just say x squared equals 25 fourths, so x is equal to plus or minus 5 halves. All right?
Obviously.
That is how, listen, shh, come on, because I really try to get you out of here without any homework, but I still got some problems to do. So again, we're isolating the square term by adding 25 and dividing by 4, and then taking the square root. And don't forget, when you're taking the square root, you need plus or minus. All right? So here we go. Let's look at 13. Now, for question 13, I want to remind you, 2x squared plus x minus 10 equals 0. Now, the real question is the absolute quickest way in this case would be to factor. Now, some kids are asking me, well, how do you know if you factor? Or how can you tell? Here's how you can tell. Please learn this. The first term times the last term is what? Negative 20. I need you to understand that. To see if something can factor, you multiply the first term times the last term. That's negative 20. Are there factors of 20 that make 1? And the answer is yes. Therefore, it can factor. So we're going to factor this real quick. We can say 2x and x. I'm going to put a 5 over here. And a 2 over here. So 5 and 4 makes 1 if the 5 is positive and the 4 is negative, right? So now remember, 2x plus 5 equals 0. X minus 2 equals 0. So x is negative 5 halves, or x equals 2. Yes, sir. Because remember, 5, watch this. 5 times negative 2 is negative 10. You remember that? And then we did the smiley faces, remember? And that's 5x and negative 4x, which makes the positive x. All right, here we go. Scrolling down, 16. Now, 416. Pay attention. Here we go. We're isolating again. So I have x plus 1 squared equals 9. X plus 1 equals plus or minus 3. X equals negative 1 plus or minus 3. X equals 2 or negative 4.
I like this method.
All right.
This one.
Wait, where'd you get the plus or minus?
Anytime you take the square root of a square, it's plus or minus.
This is probably my favorite.
Remember that? All right. Thank you, Walker, for the news flash.
You're welcome.
This is Walker's favorite.
Why do you have to do like this?
All right. Everybody good with that? All right, here we go. Let's check out 18. So again, you're isolating. Now, listen up here, please, guys. Here's how I want you to do. Look up, look up, look up. Because I want you to be this good. Stop. All right, I want you to just look at that and say x plus 1 squared equals 8.
Yes.
That's how you're supposed to do it. Then you take the square root. You're supposed to say x plus 1 equals plus or minus 2 radical 2. Your final answer, x equals negative 1 plus or minus 2 radical 2. That's how I want you to act. All right? That means you're thinking better backwards now if you can do that. All right? You're isolating the square term. All right? Now let's take a look at question number 20. We can just do what? Take the square root. 2x plus 3 equals plus or minus 10. 2x equals negative 3 plus or minus 10. X equals negative 3 plus or minus 10 over 2, which is the same as 7 over 2 or negative 13 halves. Go ahead.
Instead of adding the 3 first, could you divide by the 2?
No.
Oh, yeah.
If you divide by 2,
you
you have to divide.
3.
Yay, very smart.
Very
Good
smart.
job. All right. Now on 22, I just tried to throw a curveball here. To undo a square root, I do what? Square. So you should be able to look at this real quick and say 2x minus 4 equals.
64.
So x is obviously what? 34. X is 34.
Wait, what do you
I
mean?
got it.
Everybody good?
No, I have another one.
All right, here we go. 24. Now we have a proportion. So on number 24, all we're going to have to do is cross multiply here. When I cross multiply, I get 6x squared minus 4x equals 3.
Oh, yeah.
Come on, come on, come on. Look, just look up and figure it out. It's a proportion. You cross multiply. You having trouble with 1 times 3?
Yes.
Or is it 2x times 3x minus 2? All right, now you see my point. All right, now it's a quadratic, so we got to set it equal to 0. So 6x squared minus 4x minus 3 equals 0. Now I'm asking, does that factor?
Yes.
What is the First times the last. Negative 18. Are there any factors of 18 that are 4?
No.
No. So does it factor? No. So we must use the quadratic. Here we go. X equals 4 plus or minus the square root of 16 minus 4 times A times C all over 12. Simplifying. 4 plus or minus the square root. 4 times 6 is 24. 24 times 3 is 72. Two negatives make a positive. 72 plus 16 today is 88 over 12. All right, breaking 88 down to 4 times 22 leaves me with 4 plus or minus 2 radical 22 over 12. Simplifying that, 2 plus or minus square root of 22 over 6.
No.
Right.
We need to
Easy.
finish.
Easy, easy.
Are we gonna have a future next week?
You move way so fast for easy.
Mr. Stroud, move fast.
Amazing.
All right.
I agree. Please don't listen to Mr. Stroud.
26.
No!
You can factor it. You can factor it.
Yes.
Factor it. So x minus 4 squared equals. Wait. X minus 4 and x minus 4. So x equals 4.
Yeah, that totally made sense.
I'll be like that.
They're all that easy.
That shit.
Yeah, you just got it.
Yes,
You got
they
it
are.
ahead.
All right.
That's it?
What? That's a double root. Thank you, Walker.
What's happening?
All right.
What?
Now look, on 28, I tried to throw you another curveball. Is this even a quadratic? No. This is the first problem you did when you walked into class this year. Let's see how smart or how far you've come. Let's see if you get this one
Minus
correct.
3 divided by 2. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Some of you.
Complicate this.
I don't get what you're doing, but I'll just write it down.
Zoe, you're literally just did 3 times 2x. 3 times 2 is 4. Negative 7x.
I'm on the wrong one. I'm so confused.
Wait, how we're all done.
What number did we got that for this?
Wow, good job.
We did 26.
You passed. You passed the
Mine
first
doesn't
day
have
challenge.
26.
All
Oh,
right.
yeah.
You are better than your first day. How about that?
Oh, yeah.
How about?
All right, here we go. Now on this, here we go.
Oh, wow. This one looks
I know how to do it.
See, add 3 divided by 2. I was right.
No, you subtract 3 and then divide by 2.
Yeah. Same thing.
So it's square root of 23 minus 5 equals 15. Oh, I got it.
Yeah, 225, obviously.
Yeah.
Obviously, boys.
It's obviously 225.
Actually,
X definitely.
Yeah, actually, I'm
You can do number 26.
actually know that.
Oh, I actually do that. I know the square root of 25.
Let's go.
You know the square root of 15, what is that?
225.
That's 15 squared.
Oh, it's
Not
it's
the
like
square
it's
root.
like 7.34 something.
Oh,
It's
wow.
like 7.4 something.
The square root of 15 is like 7.
Oh my god.
No, the square root of 15 is like 3.91 or something.
So we have to do it because I still remember
Yes.
the dial.
Is that
All right. Homework.
No, there's no homework.
You must write the quadratic formula 100 times without copying and pasting either.
Not making any
Do
promises.
we actually
Wait, no. Walker, are you upset? I didn't assign homework. I'm sorry.
Oh, you
I'm
can.
sorry,
You should
Walker.
give him all the evils.
Is it okay, Walker? Can we just skip one night?
Sure.
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
all right. Walker's
Walker all
letting
the
us off
Walker,
the hook.
you can do all the odds.
All right.
We have 1 minute left.